Do you want your final edits looking like this? Or maybe learn how to edit like this? Level up your news stories with a map? Or just give your documentary that extra little bit? Well, I'm going to show you how through a series of videos on all of my tips for editing on Premiere Pro. This will be specifically aimed for broadcast journalism students, so that is your long documentaries or your news gathering. I'm going to start out with showing you some basics, how to set up your Premiere Pro and how I like to personally use all the tools. And then I'll get into more in-depth tutorials as well. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. Let's get into it. Alright, so when we first get into Premiere Pro, this is what we are met with. So we'll have our recent projects, so you can see I was working on my documentary, and we'll also have new project and open project for something that is less recent. So we'll click on new project just to get started, and we'll just give it a name. Make sure that it's saved to where you want it saved, so this will just save it. As you can see, the file pathway is documents and then Adobe Premiere Pro 25.0, and we don't want a template. You can skip import mode. I tend to, just because it gets a little bit easier, but I'll show you what happens if you don't, and then we'll create. So this is what import mode looks like. It will take you to all the files you have on your computer. So this is what I have in my downloads. Ignore that. And we've got desktop, documents, everything, so you can figure out where you want to go from here, but I just tend to skip it and I go for this. Now, the first thing you want to do is choose what workspace you like to work with. I personally prefer most working on effects because we can have all of our effects, graphics, everything here. We have our properties, essential sound, Lumetri color, everything we need here. Sequence, this will be where you can kind of see what you're working on at any given time. And then here I've got my effects controls, Lumetri scopes, which is for things like colorizing, source, which is when you drag something from here to here and crop it down. And we've also got our audio and text, which is our transcript, captions and graphics. But some people, they have their preferences. I suggest you play around a bit. Sometimes you want to focus just on audio or just on captions and graphics. But yes, I find that effects is the easiest and has the most things. So if you are following along word for word, go to your effects if you are not already in it. And here we have around the same thing. So if you select or deselect some of them, they'll pop right up. So for example, let's go with audio track mixer, and now it's in here. And to close one of these panels, it's just as simple. You click these three lines and close the panel. If you want to undock it, so remove it from this specific selection, you can choose undock and it becomes its own little window. You can then drag it around and mess around with it. Maybe you want it up here instead, and now it's there. Or if you want it to have its own separate place, you can put it there. Just go ahead and close that. I also like to mess around with kind of the proportions. It just gives you a neat workspace. Everything becomes easier if you have a workspace that you're comfortable and you know your way around. Next, we want to figure out our sequences and our sequence settings. Right now we have nothing in the timeline, so if you go here, it's not going to show anything. So, file, we want to go to, you can open recent if you have something that you're working on, or open project. Open project will open everything here, but let's just go for import for now. So if I just scroll all the way back down and shift click this, I can select all of them to come on in, and it'll take a minute to import them. And now they are all in this project area. If I then want to break it up a little bit, deselect those, I can right click or command click depending on what your mouse settings are and go to new bin. And this is essentially a project within a project. and you can rename it whatever you want. You essentially just drag it in, and now when you open this bin, it's more specific. So that can help you with just a bit of organization. To create a sequence when you don't have any, you essentially just want to drag and drop. That's all. And when you select and press delete, it will delete it. With source, what we can do is we can take and drag and drop into here and scroll through an entire clip. So say I only want from here, I select I, and I want it to stop around here, I'll click O. And then I can just drag the video only, just the audio, or if I drag from about here, I can bring both in. And it'll look like that. If I only drag, say, the video in, it would come onto the sequence like this. Now we can edit our sequence settings. So if you go into sequence settings, it comes up with this window. Right now it's correct, so this is kind of what we want for Winol. So this is 1920 by 1080, so that's 1080p. Sometimes when you're recording on a camera, it might be in 4K, so you just need to make sure that these are correct, because when you put it into the gallery, it can come out as blown out of proportion. Sometimes if you're recording on your phone, it might only be in 720, so it might be too small. And it also just means that you can standardize all of your clips when you put them in. You also want to make sure you're on 25 frames a second. That is the standard for us. 24 frames per second is the American standard. We don't use that. If we go into anything but 25 frames per second for Winol at least, it will not run properly. That's why we're always checking, and there's always at least one VT a week that's stopping and starting or going incorrectly. It's also why, fun fact, if you go into TV streaming services, sometimes they feel a bit sped up or higher pitched. It's because they've been sped up from the 24 frames a second to 25 frames per second. Just a little tidbit there. Some cameras also record in 30 frames per second. You don't need to worry about frames per second when you are recording. The only time you do is if you, for example, want to do slow-mo, then you're going to be wanting to record in these higher frames a second so that it's smoother when you slow it down in post. But yeah, we just need to be working in 25 frames per second, so that's all good. If you, for example, are making an Instagram reel, you're basically just swapping these over. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So it'd be 1080. And 1920. And as you can see, these numbers have then swapped around as well. That's our ratio. If we just go for there, this was fine. I'm just changing it. And now it looks like this. And if I want to resize this clip, I just double click it and it's resized. I'll go a bit more into things like effects and animating in a different video, just because there's so much to learn. And this is just an intro, but you get the basic gist. If I want to go back on something I did, the keyboard shortcut is Command Z. And that's just bringing us back to where we were. If I took it a bit too far and I want to re-go, I Command Shift Z and it brings us back. So those are two keyboard shortcuts that are just really easy to know, and they're very handy to know. A quick explanation of what these do. So the ones that you need to be using the most are, of course, the selection tool. That's the main one. It lets you select everything you need to select. We have the razor tool, which I find very helpful. It's more precise the more zoomed in you are, and it means that, say, if I want to get rid of a few of these frames, I can just razor it there, and it's cut it exactly on those frames. And if I say I want to make it a bit longer, I can just drag it out once that red line is there, just drag it back out. The rectangle or the shape tool is quite handy if you are making graphics, which I'll get into in another video. We've got the hand tool, which just means basically, say if we are zoomed in and I want to move around a bit, I could just move it. This is not moving the actual image. I'm not animating anything. It's just letting me have a little more of a detailed look. And of course the type tool that will help with all of your text, captions and graphics. a few more things that I'll get into more depth in later videos. If I right click this, I can cut, copy. Copy is also Control C or Command C, and paste is then Command V. There's also this button here, unlink, and basically what it does is it creates the video and audio and it makes them separate. So I can clip the audio completely, or I can clip the video. If I then shift select it so they're both selected at the same time, right click again, I can link them back up, or I can nest them. So that's if you're working on a really chunky animation, you just kind of want to make it neater, you can nest it. Another important one is speed or durations. This is if you are looking at speeding it up, you would put it at 200% speed if you want it to be twice as quick. If you want it to be a slow-mo, you might put it at 50%, and reverse basically just means that you're putting it backwards. Maintaining audio pitch will help with things such as slow-moing it, because if you don't know, when you put something slower or quicker, slower will make sound lower and quicker will make sound higher, and you don't always want that. Again, if I right click, one issue that comes up a lot is when you recorded your audio, it might only play in your left ear or your right ear. This can be quite noticeable if it's not a stylistic choice, because sometimes, you know, especially in documentaries or podcasts, you might want the voices only coming from one side and you might want to play around with that a bit. But for TV, it's generally nicer as a viewer to have it come from both sides and be quite equal. So what you'll want to do is you go to audio channels and you can mess around with it here. Again, I'll make another video on audio fixing and everything to do with that, because it can get a bit tedious getting into it. And that's all the sort of important bits here. If you want to do a bit of admin-y stuff, what you might want to do is select a label. That's what I do in my documentary. I just change the labels for, you know, if I was loving a sequence or if I was absolutely hating it, I would change, and it just made things a bit easier to navigate. Toggling the track output. So if I just click this, it turns invisible. That's all it is really. You can also lock it in place if you don't want to accidentally make edits basically. Last but not least, once you are done with a file, go to Export Media and it'll bring you to this page. You can also just click Export. You want to change the file name to whatever you want. And this is important especially for Winol. You want to match the source. You want it at H.264. You want to make sure your video, so this is the last chance to change it if you need. You want to make sure it's full HD, so 1920 times 1080. You want it to be 25 frames a second. Those two you don't need to worry about, but keep them as that. Audio, it should all be around this. 48,000 hertz is kind of what we're looking for. Stereo is good, but mono 5.1, it doesn't matter too much. Stereo is just kind of a good standard if you're commonly wearing headphones, things like that. You will probably want to make sure it's an entire source, unless you are working on your documentary and you only want to export the first 5 minutes, say. In which case, you might click in, which is I, and then O for out. Those are the letters I and O. And that's custom, and so we'll go entire source. Make sure it's all good, maybe have a little playback just to be sure, and then you'll export. And we're all done.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope it was helpful. I'll be making quite a few videos like these, looking at things like special effects, graphics, audio fixes, the likes. But if you have anything specific that you would like me to cover, such as color grading or text and captions, just let me know down below. Bye bye!